At Morrison & Associates, a boutique marketing firm in downtown Seattle, I was made invisible to most people. Which was fine by me. I preferred listening to the office dynamics, understanding the real power structures, and watching how ideas flowed through the hierarchy. My manager, Victoria, was everything I wasn't. She was loud, confident, with this ability to command a room just by walking into it. She had that polished corporate presence that made executives lean in when she spoke. Perfect blonde highlights, designer blazers, and this laugh that could be heard 3 cubicles away. Everyone said she was a natural leader. What they didn't see was the 2 hours I spent every morning preparing talking points for her 9 a.m. client calls. Or how she'd swing by my desk at 4:30 p.m. asking for just a quick summary of the campaign metrics I'd been analyzing all day. Victoria had this way of making it seem collaborative. Let's brainstorm this together, Maya, while I did the actual work. The breaking point came during our monthly team meeting. We were pitching ideas for the Cascade Electronics account, a tech startup that wanted to rebrand their image from boring enterprise software to innovative problem solvers. I'd spent the weekend researching their competitors, mapping their customer journey, and developing what I thought was a solid strategy. What about positioning them as the invisible infrastructure that makes everything else possible? I suggested, pulling up the mood board I'd created. Like, they're not flashy, but they're essential. Think of it as the power behind the power. Victoria's eyes lit up. That's interesting, Maya, but let me build on that. She stood up, moving to the whiteboard. What if we position them as the invisible force that drives innovation? The power behind the power. Exactly. They're not just infrastructure, they're the secret weapon. She spent the next 10 minutes expanding on her idea, adding buzzwords and corporate speak that made my simple concept sound revolutionary. The room was nodding, our creative director was taking notes, and I watched my weekend's work get repackaged with Victoria's signature confidence. After the meeting, I stayed behind to clean up the conference room. That's when I heard Victoria talking to James, our senior partner, in the hallway. Maya's got good instincts, she was saying, but she's too quiet to lead. She's more of a behind-the-scenes talent, you know? Perfect for research and strategy work, but clients need someone who can really drive the conversation. Think she'll ever develop that presence? James asked. Maybe. But some people are just background talent. Nothing wrong with that, we need those people too. I stood there holding a stack of empty coffee cups, feeling something shift inside me. Background talent. Too quiet to lead. I'd been hearing variations of this my entire career, but coming from Victoria, who built her reputation on my ideas, it hit differently. That night, I went home and did something I'd never done before. I created a folder on my personal drive called Documentation and started transferring every email, every strategy document, every campaign brief I'd created over the past 18 months. Not to use against anyone, just to have a record of what I'd actually contributed. Victoria thought quiet people were background talent. But she forgot that quiet people hear everything. And starting that day, I was going to be listening very carefully. The next few weeks, Victoria started giving me more client-facing work. You're so good with the detailed stuff, she'd say, forwarding me client emails that needed responses. Can you handle the follow-up calls? I've got that board presentation to prep for. At first, I thought it was punishment for being too quiet. But then I realized it was opportunity. Victoria saw client maintenance as grunt work, the boring stuff that happened between the exciting pitch meetings and strategy sessions. She wanted to be the visionary who swept in with big ideas, not the person who answered questions about campaign metrics or explained why we chose one font over another. But clients, I learned, actually cared about the boring stuff. A lot. Take Marcus from Cascade Electronics. Victoria had sold him on our invisible infrastructure concept, still stung every time I heard her say it, but she'd missed some crucial details about their Q4 launch timeline. When Marcus emailed asking about integration with their existing brand guidelines, Victoria forwarded it to me with a note. Can you handle this? Should be straightforward. It wasn't straightforward. Their brand guidelines were a mess. Their previous agency had left them with inconsistent messaging, and their internal team was split between 2 different creative directions. I spent 3 hours on a call with Marcus, walking through every element of their current brand identity and explaining how our strategy would bridge their old image with their new positioning. This is exactly what I needed, Marcus said at the end of the call. Victoria's great with the big picture stuff, but you actually understand how to make it work. The next week, When Victoria was out of town at a conference, Marcus called with an urgent request. Their CEO wanted to see mock-ups before approving the campaign budget. It was Wednesday, and they needed everything by Friday. Victoria was unreachable, something about a panel discussion and networking events. So I stayed late, built 3 different mock-up concepts, and sent them directly to Marcus with a detailed explanation of each approach. Marcus forwarded my email to his entire team, including their CEO. The response came back within an hour. Love option 2. Let's move forward. Great work. When Victoria returned on Monday, she found an email from Marcus thanking her for the quick turnaround and excellent execution. She forwarded it to me with a smiley face emoji and the message, "Nice work supporting the team." Supporting the team. I was doing the work, but she was getting the credit. Again. That's when I started noticing something interesting. Marcus had started copying me directly on emails to Victoria. Not just the mundane stuff, strategic questions, timeline concerns, creative feedback. He'd write to both of us, but his responses always felt more directed toward me. Same thing happened with our second biggest client, North Shore Financial. Victoria had pitched them a complete brand overhaul, but their marketing director, Sarah, kept running into implementation issues. Victoria would promise to circle back and dive deeper into the details, but she never did. So I did. I started building spreadsheets tracking their campaign performance, created detailed reports on their demographic data, and developed a content calendar that actually aligned with their business goals. When Sarah had questions, I had answers. When she needed changes, I made them happen. 3 weeks into this routine, Sarah sent me an email that made me pause. "Maya, I know Victoria's the lead on this account, but I have to say, you're the reason this partnership is working. You actually listen to what we need and deliver solutions that make sense. I hope Morrison and Associates recognizes what they have in you." I stared at that email for a long time. Then I quietly moved it to my documentation folder. By the end of the month, I was handling day-to-day communication for 4 of Victoria's 6 major accounts. She thought she was delegating the boring work. But I was building relationships she didn't even know she was losing. Late one Thursday night, I was still at the office fixing a crisis Victoria had created. She'd sent the wrong campaign brief to North Shore Financial, a draft that still had another client's branding and messaging. Sarah had called, confused and a little annoyed. "I think there might have been a mix-up," she said diplomatically. "This brief mentions restaurants and food service, but we're a financial advisory firm." I apologized, sent the correct brief, and stayed until 10 p.m. making sure every detail was perfect. When I finally sent the corrected version, Sarah replied within minutes. "Thank you for fixing this so quickly. I know who's actually steering this ship, and it's not who I thought it was." That night, I moved my personal work files out of the shared server and into my own secured folders. I also started keeping a detailed log of every client interaction, every email response, every strategic decision I made without Victoria's input. Because I was starting to realize something, Victoria needed me more than I needed her. She just didn't know it yet. The moment I knew there was no going back came during the Cascade Electronics campaign launch. I'd spent 3 weeks building a comprehensive social media strategy, complete with content calendars, engagement metrics, and a detailed analysis of their target demographics' online behavior. It was the kind of work that required deep research, creative thinking, and strategic planning. Basically everything Victoria claimed I was too quiet to do. The presentation was scheduled for Thursday morning. Victoria was planning to present to Marcus and his team, with me supporting by handling the technical details. I'd prepared detailed notes, created backup slides for potential questions, and rehearsed every transition. Tuesday night, I got a text from Victoria. "Can you send me the full presentation? Want to review before Thursday." I sent everything. Every slide, every talking point, every strategic framework I'd developed. Wednesday, I didn't hear from her all day. Thursday morning, I arrived at the office to find Victoria in the conference room, rehearsing my presentation, with her name on every slide. "Maya, perfect timing," she said when I walked in. I made some adjustments to the presentation flow. Much stronger now. I looked at the screen. She'd changed the footer from Prepared by Maya Chen to Prepared by Victoria Martinez. She'd also added a new opening slide titled Strategic Vision by Victoria Martinez that positioned everything as her original concept. Should I set up the technical demos? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Actually, I think I can handle most of this myself. You can jump in if we get into the weeds about implementation details. The meeting started at 10 a.m. Victoria was brilliant, confident, engaging, completely in command of the room. She presented my strategy like she'd been thinking about it for months, answered questions with insights I'd provided in my notes, and explained complex concepts with a kind of authority that made everyone nod along. Marcus asked about the demographic analysis, and Victoria launched into a detailed explanation of millennial social media behavior patterns. It was word for word from a report I'd written, but she delivered it like she'd conducted the research herself. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need," Marcus said. "Victoria, you really understand our market." I sat there taking notes, watching Victoria build her reputation on my work. When Marcus asked about implementation timelines, she glanced at me. "Maya can walk you through the technical details." I spent 10 minutes explaining how we'd execute the strategy, handling the boring operational stuff while Victoria nodded approvingly. When I finished, Marcus thanked us both, but his praise was clearly directed at Victoria. "Brilliant work, Victoria. This is why we chose Morrison and Associates." After the meeting, Victoria was glowing. "That went perfectly. Great support, Maya. I think we really nailed the strategic vision." Strategic vision. My strategic vision. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I sent Marcus a follow-up email with additional resources and implementation details. But I also attached something extra, a detailed timeline showing when each element of the strategy had been developed, complete with version timestamps and research sources. I didn't say anything explicitly, just provided documentation. Marcus replied the next morning, "Thanks for the additional context, Maya. Really helpful to understand the research process behind the strategy. The timeline shows how much thought went into this." Then he sent a second email, this one copying our regional director, Amanda. "I wanted to flag that Maya's research and strategic development work on this campaign has been exceptional. The depth of analysis and implementation planning is exactly what we need for our Q1 launch." Amanda forwarded it to me with a note, "Nice work, Maya. This kind of client feedback is exactly what we look for during performance reviews." When Victoria saw the email thread, she called me into her office. "Maya, I need to ask you something. Are you intentionally trying to undermine me with clients?" I looked at her, sitting behind her desk with her arms crossed. "I'm not sure what you mean." The email to Marcus. With all the documentation and timelines. "It feels like you're trying to take credit for work we did together. I thought transparency about our process would be helpful for the client relationship. But it makes it look like you did all the work." I paused. "Didn't I?" Victoria's face went red. "That's not the point. We're a team. When you go directly to clients with this kind of detailed follow-up, it undermines the account leadership structure." "I'll keep that in mind," I said. But walking back to my desk, I realized something had shifted. For the first time, Victoria was worried about my relationship with her clients. She was starting to see me as a threat instead of support staff. That evening, I got another email from Marcus. "Maya, could you send me your direct contact information? I'd like to loop you in on some strategic discussions we're having about Q2 campaigns." I forwarded the email to Victoria, as protocol required. But I also saved it in my documentation folder. Because I was starting to understand something important. Clients don't care about office hierarchies. They care about results. And increasingly, they were associating those results with me. The shift started small. Marcus began copying me on emails to Victoria, then started addressing questions directly to me. Sarah from North Shore Financial started calling my desk line instead of going through Victoria. Our third biggest client, Evergreen Marketing, requested that I be included in their monthly strategy calls. Victoria tried to maintain control. "Maya, when clients reach out directly, please loop me in immediately. I need to stay on top of account communications." But looping her in became complicated when clients started asking for things she couldn't deliver. Like when Marcus needed a detailed competitive analysis for a board presentation. Victoria promised to put together something comprehensive, but 3 days later, she forwarded the request to me with a note, "Can you handle this? I'm swamped with the Patterson pitch." I spent the weekend building a 40-slide analysis of Cascade Electronics' competitive landscape, complete with market positioning maps, feature comparisons, and strategic recommendations. It was the kind of work that required deep industry knowledge and analytical thinking, exactly what Victoria claimed I was too quiet to do. Monday morning, I sent it directly to Marcus with a note: "Here's the competitive analysis you requested. Let me know if you need any adjustments before your board presentation." Marcus replied within an hour: "This is incredible work, Maya. Exactly what we needed. Mind if I have our CEO call you directly to discuss the strategic recommendations?" I forwarded the email to Victoria, as required. Her response came back immediately: "Great work supporting the account. I'll handle the CEO call." But when the CEO called, he asked specifically for me. "Marcus tells me you're the strategic mind behind our campaigns. I'd like to understand your recommendations for our competitive positioning." I spent an hour walking through the analysis, explaining market dynamics and strategic opportunities. The CEO was impressed. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need. Marcus, make sure Maya is our primary contact for all strategic discussions." That afternoon, Victoria called me into her office again. "Maya, I need you to be more careful about how you position yourself with clients. When you have direct conversations with executives, it can create confusion about account leadership. I thought providing strategic support was part of my role." Support, yes. But there's a difference between support and trying to establish yourself as the primary contact. I nodded. "I understand." But I didn't change anything, because the clients were making the choice themselves. The breaking point came during our monthly team meeting. Victoria was presenting account updates, taking credit for wins that everyone knew I'd delivered. When she got to the Cascade Electronics results, she spent 10 minutes explaining how her competitive analysis had impressed their CEO. "The key," she said, "was really understanding their market positioning challenges and developing a strategic framework that addressed their competitive disadvantages." I sat there listening to her describe my work with the confidence of someone who'd actually done it. But this time, I wasn't the only one who noticed. Jamie, our junior strategist, raised her hand. "Victoria, didn't Maya create that competitive analysis? I remember her working on it all weekend." Victoria's face tightened. "Maya provided research support, yes. But the strategic framework and recommendations came from our collaborative process." "Actually," I said quietly, "I developed the strategic framework independently. The client requested it directly." The room went silent. Victoria stared at me, and I could see her calculating whether to escalate or retreat. "Maya, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're crossing boundaries and undermining the account leadership structure. These clients are my responsibility." "If they're your responsibility," I said, still keeping my voice calm, "why are they asking to work directly with me?" Amanda, our regional director, leaned forward. "What do you mean, Maya?" I pulled out a folder I'd been keeping on my desk. Over the past 6 weeks, I've received formal requests from 3 major clients to be their primary strategic contact. Cascade Electronics, North Shore Financial, and Evergreen Marketing have all asked to work directly with me on strategic initiatives. Victoria's face went white. That's not how account management works." "I agree," I said. "But that's what's happening." Amanda looked between us. "Maya, can you elaborate on these requests?" I opened the folder and pulled out printed emails. Marcus from Cascade Electronics requested my direct contact for strategic discussions. Sarah from North Shore Financial asked that I be copied on all campaign communications. And David from Evergreen Marketing specifically requested that I lead their quarterly strategy reviews. "Those are isolated incidents," Victoria said, but her voice had lost its confidence. "Victoria," Amanda said carefully, "if multiple clients are requesting to work directly with Maya, we need to understand why. What's driving these requests?" Victoria looked around the room, realizing she was losing control of the narrative. "Maya has been overstepping, going directly to clients without proper authorization, undermining the account leadership structure." "Actually," I said, "I have documentation of every client interaction. Would you like to see it?" I pulled out another folder, 3 months of emails, call logs, and project documentation. Every late-night crisis I'd handled while Victoria was unreachable. Every strategic recommendation I'd made. Every client relationship I'd built while she was taking credit for my work. Amanda reached for the folder. Maya, walk me through this. For the next 20 minutes, I explained how I'd become the primary strategic contact for Victoria's biggest accounts. Not through politics or manipulation, but through competence and availability. I showed emails where clients explicitly praised my strategic thinking, requested my direct involvement, and expressed frustration when Victoria tried to manage communications. The room was quiet when I finished. Victoria looked like she was about to be sick. Maya, Amanda said finally, why didn't you bring this to my attention sooner? I thought I was providing support. Victoria told me I was too quiet to lead, so I focused on doing good work behind the scenes. Amanda looked at Victoria. Is that accurate? Did you tell Maya she was too quiet to lead? Victoria's silence was answer enough. I think, Amanda said, we need to have a private conversation about account management and leadership development. The meeting ended awkwardly, with Victoria gathering her papers and leaving without making eye contact. The rest of the team sat in uncomfortable silence until Amanda dismissed us. Walking back to my desk, I realized something had fundamentally changed. I was no longer Victoria's quiet support staff. I was her competition. That evening, I updated my LinkedIn profile. Changed my title from marketing strategist to senior strategic consultant. Added a summary highlighting my client relationship management and strategic development experience. 3 connection requests came in within an hour. All from clients. The next few weeks were tense. Victoria started micromanaging my client communications, requesting to be copied on every email and included in every call. But clients pushed back. Maya, can we schedule a direct call to discuss Q2 strategy? Marcus asked during a team meeting. I'd prefer to work through the details with you directly. Victoria interjected, all strategic discussions should include account leadership. Of course, Marcus said diplomatically. But Maya understands our technical requirements and strategic goals. It's more efficient to work directly with her for implementation planning. Amanda, who'd been quietly observing these interactions, pulled me aside the following week. Maya, I've been reviewing your client feedback and strategic contributions. I want to discuss your career development. We sat in her office, and she opened a folder filled with client emails and performance metrics. Your client retention rate is 95%. Your strategic recommendations have generated an average of 23% improvement in campaign performance. And you've received formal praise from every major client you've worked with. I nodded, unsure where this was going. I'm recommending you for promotion to Strategic Account Director. It's a new position we're creating to better support our high-value client relationships. What about Victoria? Amanda sighed. Victoria has been placed on a professional development plan. She's struggling with client retention and strategic execution. We're working with her on leadership skills and collaborative management. Professional development plan. Corporate speak for you're in trouble. I want to be clear, Amanda continued, this isn't about replacing Victoria. It's about restructuring our account management to better serve client needs. You'd be leading strategic development for our top-tier accounts, while Victoria focuses on new business development. Translation: I was getting Victoria's biggest clients, and she was being moved to prospecting work. I'd like to think about it, I said. Of course. But Maya. Amanda paused. You've proven that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about delivering results and building trust. That's something Victoria never understood. That afternoon, I had coffee with Jamie, our junior strategist. She'd been watching the office dynamics with interest. Are you going to take the promotion? She asked. Probably. But I'm not sure I want to do it the way Victoria did. What do you mean? Victoria led through control and credit taking. I want to lead through collaboration and competence. Build a team where people aren't afraid to speak up. Jamie smiled. That sounds like the kind of leader I'd want to work for. 2 weeks later, I accepted the promotion. Victoria was reassigned to new business development, reporting to a different director. She cleaned out her office on a Friday afternoon, and I watched from my desk as she packed up her designer accessories and motivational posters. She stopped by my desk on her way out. Maya, I want you to know. I never meant to make you feel unheard. I thought I was helping you develop professionally. I looked at her, seeing something I'd never seen before, genuine remorse. I know, I said. But help should make people stronger, not invisible. Victoria nodded, then walked toward the elevator. I never saw her again. My first week as Strategic Account Director was revealing. I discovered that Victoria had been taking credit for work across the entire team, not just mine. Jamie had developed a social media strategy that Victoria had presented as her own. Tom, our analytics specialist, had created a performance measurement framework that Victoria had claimed credit for in her quarterly review. I called a team meeting and established new protocols. Every strategy document would include contributor credits, every client presentation would acknowledge the team members who'd done the work, and every success would be shared rather than claimed. I want to be clear, I told the team, strategic leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about creating an environment where everyone can contribute their best work and get recognition for it. The difference was immediate. Team members started proposing ideas more freely, clients noticed the improved collaboration, and our strategic work became more innovative and comprehensive. 3 months later, at our annual company retreat, Amanda asked me to present our account management approach to the entire firm. Maya's team has achieved 98% client retention and 35% growth in strategic account revenue, she announced. I've asked her to share her leadership philosophy with everyone. Standing at the front of the room, looking out at 50 colleagues, I felt a moment of irony. Victoria had been right about one thing, I was quiet. But she'd been wrong about what that meant. Leadership isn't about commanding attention, I said. It's about paying attention. To your team, to your clients, to the details that make the difference between good work and great work. I talked about building trust through competence, creating space for everyone to contribute, and leading through service rather than ego. When I finished, the applause was genuine and sustained. Afterward, several people approached me with questions about team management and client relations. One of them was a junior strategist from another department. Maya, I've been told I'm too quiet to lead. How do you respond to that? I smiled. I tell them quiet people hear everything. And sometimes, that's exactly what leadership requires. That evening, I reflected on the journey from background talent to strategic account director. I hadn't become louder or more aggressive. I hadn't changed my personality or adopted Victoria's commanding presence. I'd simply stopped accepting other people's definitions of what leadership looked like. The next Monday, I got an email from Marcus at Cascade Electronics. Maya, I wanted to let you know that our CEO mentioned your strategic work in his board presentation. He said you're the kind of strategic thinker every company needs. Thanks for being such a strong partner. I forwarded the email to Amanda, not for credit or recognition, but because good news should be shared. Then I got back to work on the strategic plan for our newest client. They'd specifically requested to work with the quiet strategist who actually listens and delivers results. I laughed, remembering Victoria's words from almost a year ago. Too quiet to lead. Maybe. But I'd learned something important. The best leaders don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. They just need to be the ones people trust to get things done. And trust, I'd discovered, is built quietly, one relationship at a time. 6 months later, I hired Victoria as a freelance consultant for a project that required her particular strengths in new business development. She'd learned some things about collaboration and credit sharing during her time away from Morrison & Associates. You know, she said during our first project meeting, I used to think leadership was about being heard. Now I think it's about helping others find their voice. I nodded. Sounds like you've been doing some good thinking. Yeah. Turns out quiet people aren't the only ones who can learn to listen. We built a great campaign together. This time, both our names were on the final presentation.